Okay, so we're back here at Records Management 101. I went over what is records management and what the definitions are for government records is where we ended up. So I went over the first part of the definitions, which is the archives division definition of it. The last sentence says databases. That is to let you know that although it appears that the state is very much paper-based, the State Record Center appears to be paper-based as well as the archives division in general, it's no longer true. The state archives actually has a digital archives where we archive records that are born digital. And we have also been digitizing our older records that are being requested many, many times year after year so that people will have access to those because they need it for their research. So just to let you know, it does include electronic records or digital records. HRS 92F3 is from OIP, Office of Information Practices. And their definition says government record means information maintained by an agency in written, auditory, visual, electronic, and other physical forms. The final one has to do with public administration, and it's actually having to do with protection of records. They want to make sure that government records are not tampered with. The definition says all records created, issued, received, or kept by any government agency or government agency or office are required by law to be kept by others for information of the government. Record series, which is what we are calling sets of records that are listed in our retention schedules, are units of files or records arranged according to a filing system or kept together because they relate to a particular subject or function, result in the same activity, document a specific kind of transaction. Each record series must be covered by a records retention or disposition schedule in accordance with HRS 94-3. So sometimes people get confused about series. They think of individual records, especially when they're talking about case files. So when we talk about case files, a case file would be either a legal case file, a medical record. There are a variety of different types of documents in there. What's being scheduled is not the individual records inside those folders for each client or for each patient. It's actually the entire thing is considered a medical record, and the retention applies to those folders containing the various different documents. Okay, so why do we need to retain or manage our records? HRS 94-3 requires us to actually have um, each public officer, except for public officers of judiciary or the legislative branch of government, having the care and custody of all of any government records, shall submit to the state comptroller a list for disposition authorizations, which shall include the name of the office, department, bureau, the description of the records for disposal, and the inclusive dates of the records and the retention period. So therein lies the requirement for executive branch agencies. The judiciary and the legislature have their own records management programs. So why do we need to manage our records? Once again, besides we need to comply with the HRS 94-3, if our records are managed better, we actually have better workflows when we're using those records. We can save money by making sure that records that don't need to be retained are actually destroyed, and they're not taking up room in our offices. They're not taking up room in our third-party storage. Uh, Retrieval is actually much, much more effective because when you manage your records, you know where those records are. You know which records were destroyed already, so you're not going to be looking for them. And you know which records are still in the office or in third-party system, so you know exactly how to find it and where to get it when you need it. We also minimize risk by destroying records in accordance with an approved retention schedule so that if there's any litigation, we don't need to go through so many records, and especially if they're electronic records, we don't need to produce all of those records if we destroyed it properly, meaning once we know there's litigation, we have to put a hold on those records. But until we notify that there's litigation, or if we're not anticipating any litigation, we can apply those retention schedules and go ahead and destroy those records. Once there's a legal hold, unfortunately, we need to hold on to those records because they will be asked for us as part of the discovery for evidence. So minimize risk by minimizing the amount of records that legally you need to hold so that you don't need to go through so many during litigation. We can also protect our data. If we know what kind of information or records we have in our custody, we can set up measures to make sure that they are protected. If they are in a shared drive, we need to make sure that only certain people can actually have access to those records. Um, so it's almost like having it in a file cabinet. You don't want those file cabinets, if it's paper, to be out in the open in our reception areas where people can just hold on to it. We can actually have it in a file room where there's lock and key, so only people who need to access that record can do so. It's also a way to preserve knowledge. So, as I mentioned earlier, only 3 to 5% of all records created are considered of permanent historical, legal, uh, administrative, fiscal value. The rest of our records, after so many years, have no such value and can be destroyed. The problem with not having a retention schedule that tells you which records are permanent is many of us are not aware that we do have records in our offices, no matter what a small percentage that is, that should be retained because uh, it actually documents what our agency has done uh, in accordance with its mandate. So we're talking about things like administrative records. We're talking about things like public relations files, scrapbooks, photographs, PR materials, reports that were submitted over time that should be preserved because those are the types of things that document what we have done. And of course, eight, having a well managed set of records boosts morale because we're not putting a lot of burden on our staff to find records that we need because they are well organized. Things that we don't need have been destroyed in accordance with a retention schedule, and things that we need in office are protected from theft. They're protected from inadvertent deletion and improper access. And the records are true, correct, and are verifiable that are created by or received by our agency. Okay, so what are our various roles and responsibilities? So the department has to establish a records management program and have policies in place. You need to appoint a records officer who has thorough knowledge of the organization and its functions. So recently, I think early part of this year, we did send out a request to the various department heads to appoint a records officer or to at least update what we have on our list as records officers. And we have received from all of you. So I do have a list of them. I'll show them to you in a few slides from now. This is the person that you will contact to ask for assistance if you're trying to do something like create a new record keeping management system, or you're going ahead to purchase one, or you have a contractor you want to hire to set that up for you. You need to contact your records officer because there are a few things we need to consider. First of all is do we have retention for the types of records that are going to be managed by that record keeping system? Are the retention schedules up to date? Um, does the system actually allow you to apply retention to those records so that your database, it doesn't get too big, it doesn't get slowed down because you have oodles of records. Many of them maybe could be uh, removed or destroyed after so many years of inactivity. So if you contact your records officer, that officer could assist you or could help by contacting us. And then we could help you at least point out those things so that when you're going through the changes, those things are in place to help you manage your records. Um, you're also, as a department, required to create an inventory of agency records and to make sure the records retention schedules are up to date. And you have file plans within your offices so that your staff can apply retention and manage the records. These are the list of departmental records officers. So you could probably see who's yours. Here's the second half. As you notice, some agencies or some University of Hawaii has multiples. You can have multiples if you want that to be for your agency. And that is because sometimes their agencies are so big and the responsibilities are so varied that they prefer to have someone within a division to manage those records. Okay, what are our roles and responsibilities as state employees? So the first one is to create or receive those records in the course of government business. We do need to take care of those records so that the information can be found when needed and secure from theft and unauthorized use or alteration, so that our records are, you know, um, correct. And then the last one is to carry out disposition of records under your control in accordance with an approved retention schedule. With regards to the Archives Division, HRS 94-1.2 shows our responsibility. The State Archivist administers the state archives where permanent records are stored, the Records Management Program, which I'm at, and the Digital Archives programs and facilities. We advise and assist state agencies in the preparation of retention and disposition schedules and provide records management training, like today, and technical assistance services to agencies when you're going through various things like mentioned earlier, updating your record keeping system. The state record center services are as follows. We assist agencies in managing records. We issue advice sheets every so often when there are kind of like major records management type issues that come up. We also help you create, update abolish records retention and disposition schedules. We store paper records, microfilms, and videotapes in our microfilm vault. We pick up records from your agencies. If you're coming in from the neighbor islands, or if the records are coming in from neighbor islands and you're general funded, we actually have some funding to help you ship those records from your island to the State Records Center here on Oahu. Um, we will retrieve and refile records for you. So just because the records are here at the State Records Center, you still own those records. We're just storing them for you. So you still have access to them, and only you have access to them. The other agencies can't access for it. The general public can't access for your records. If there's any records requests from the public, they need to go through you, and you turn in a request to us, and we will actually pull the record and send it to you by messenger. If you don't have messenger service or if it's rush, we will actually drop off the record to you. For neighbor island folks, that requires you to have a contact here on Oahu. For example, DLIR, DCD. What happens is the Maui folks will turn in a request. We will send a requested material to the Honolulu office, and the Honolulu office will forward the information to them. We also destroy expired records after we receive approval from the owning agency. Of course, we destroy records only that are stored here at the State Record Center. We cannot take your records that have expired and destroy them for you at this time. You would need to do that yourself. Okay. So here are examples of advice sheets that we've issued. The first one is guidance on digitizing and scanning temporary or considered non-permanent records. And the advice sheet actually asks you the question of whether or not what you're thinking of scanning is worth scanning. So there's I think a flow chart or a set of questions that you go through. Because there are instances where scanning is not the solution to your problem, and you might actually consider moving forward scanning, but not scanning, a few years back, backwards, meaning records that were created 2, 3 years later. Uh, and also you might consider, you know, trying to figure out how to go change your processes so that you don't create paper and then have to scan it. You start off having a digital system to manage your records. The second one has to do with ephemeral social media content. Unfortunately, that one might be out of date already because our social media applications have changed their policies, and sometimes they don't actually even provide those modules anymore. So we're probably going to take that down. The advice sheets I am trying to publish these on the Hawaii State Archives website. I've submitted the request already. I think probably sometime this week they will go up, and I'll remove the ones that are out of date or exclude them. Records retention and disposition schedules can also be found on the Hawaii State Archives website. We're a little bit behind in updating some of the compilations, but we are working on them. And same thing, probably in the next few weeks, we'll be pretty much up to date. And the reason why I say that is because over the last so many months, we actually have been updating it with various state agencies. So what you see there may not be totally up to date, but it was the most recent since then. There are a few agencies that are not represented there. The reason for that is maybe there are only a few schedules in the books and they're very much out of date. So same thing, we hope the agency will contact us and we will work on those retention schedules and update them. Okay, so there are actually two types of retention schedules. Okay, so I got a question here and I'll answer it now. Deborah, our retention schedules, or sorry, the advice sheets will be on the Hawaii State Archives website. There's a section there on managing government records. It will be one of those areas there underneath managing government records. It's not up yet, so if you look today, it won't be there. But I'm hoping Alice would actually be able to put it up this week. I will follow up with her. Okay, in terms of government general record schedule, these are records that are common to all departments. So you share this retention schedule throughout state government. So these are administrative records, budget planning, accounting, payroll, personnel, procurement, property management, records management, public works, security and protective services, healthcare records, and there's a section called electronic records, which is a little misleading. At that point, when this was created, I think the last time it was majorly updated was 2002, and they were getting a lot of questions about electronic records. So they just created a section for records of that format. And it's very generic. And many times it will actually tell you it depends on the content and you need to apply retention that applies to that kind of record. So this is an example. These are official personnel folders. And I think we can all relate to that because each one of us has an official personnel folder. So what you'll see here underneath the heading is the retention schedule number, the title, and description underneath. And in the middle part is location. What that means is this retention schedule applies to personnel. Personnel is required to retain the records. So we're going to look at retention and disposition. It says retention is 30 years after termination of employment. Disposition is what do you do? What you need to do for these records is retain it in the agency for 3 years after termination. Purge, there's certain types of records you could remove from the file if you want to, and then transfer to the State Records Center for the remaining 27 years, and then destroy. So we have to be careful about the middle column there, the location, because many of us have actual official personnel folder files in our division office, sometimes in our main office, because that's where the people work and that's where copies of personnel records are also stored for the use of that little office. So the 30-year retention is actually for the personnel office. The other copies have their own retention schedules and they're generally much, much shorter than 30 years. Okay. The second type of retention schedules are departmental record schedules. These are for records that are specific to your agency, or if they are actually common to other state agencies, the way you handle that particular record might be different from the rest of state government because you're either deheard, so you have something different, or if it's a medical record, you might be EUTF. I'm not sure if EUTF has medical records, but you will treat that record a little bit differently from the rest. So you have your own specific retention schedule for that item. So here's a few more that we have. If you're with Department of Health and you looked at your retention schedule on our website, you will notice, because you're such a huge agency and some of the retention schedules are really, really old, that we compiled some, we scanned some and just attached it, and there's some that are not even there yet because we really need to work on your retention schedules. Um, okay, so here's an example. I know we have a lot of attendees from um, BNF, EUTF. So interestingly enough, you have one retention schedule, one item in your retention schedule. And it's for medical and insurance benefits enrollment forms. And it says here that you retain it. Actually, let me go back one time. It tells you when this retention schedule was created. It was created in 2003, and it's item 1 of that retention schedule. The next part is retention itself. It says 3 years after conversion to electronic records. And the disposition is after the original paper records are converted to electronic records, the original records may be stored at the State Record Center and then destroyed after cited retention. If you look at the general record schedule, we have the same item listed as item 6.27. For health fund folks, that's, I believe, EUTF, the retention is 9 years after termination of employment or death, and then you get to destroy the record. For personnel in our various departments, it's non-permanent. You can destroy it when superseded. You can destroy last record upon termination of employment. So once again, for this type of record, EUTF has their own specific way of handling the record. And then the rest of us, the rest of our personnel offices have something different. So you have to be careful about how you read the retention schedules and whether or not that schedule actually applies to you. So when you see something like this on our retention schedules, it implies that that record is the official record that is being scheduled. Everything else in our various offices, in our state agencies, are considered duplicates and can be destroyed when no longer needed. So I already went through that. This is another view of the official personnel folder. So we're going to use this as an example. So we're going to look at Schedule 5.15B and apply it. So let's say that you have records from 2020 all the way up to today of the records. So to manage official personnel folders, and you can apply this to other types of records too. We have something called active. So these are your active employees. They're still with you today. You actually create an active series of records or set of records. And these are probably in your file cabinets if they're in paper form. And every year, what you do is you actually take out and box the ones that have left service, either retired. If they transferred, I think you got to send the files elsewhere to the new agency if they still work for state government. So anyone who's separated with you. So in 2020, you should have a set of boxes containing those records. You can go ahead and store those at the State Record Center. 2021, same thing. You get to pull those records, box them, store it at the State Record Center. 2022, unfortunately, you have a 3-year requirement. You need to hold on to that file. So you can't send them to the State Record Center yet. You can box them. And then at the end of 2025, because we're going calendar year, you can actually send those records over because most likely whatever you needed to do to close out that file has been done within that 3-year period. And of course, for the more recent files, 2023, you got to wait 1 more year to send to the Record Center, 2024, 2 more years, and 2025, when it closes, of course, 3 more years, and then sent to the State Record Center in order for you to comply with the retention and disposition of those records. If you're working with electronic files, meaning you scan your personnel folders, it's very similar. What you need to do is create a file structure within your servers. So you would have one, a big folder with this heading, official personnel folders. You have active files, so you create an active folder within, subfolder. And in there, you will actually put in all the scan files, and because these are active files, you actually add documents to these files as certain events happen for this employee that you need to retain. Um, and then when these people start retiring, you will create each year a folder, and you will move that folder, that official personnel folder, into the proper uh, folder when it became inactive. Either the person retired, separated from service, something transferred. And you put it in that inactive folder for the correct year, because that year that you put it in there is when the clock starts ticking in terms of retention. You can even put there destroy on or after whatever date, 30 years later. And you can go ahead and do that. Now, within the time frame of the 30 years after the person leaves, things might happen. The person might come back. What you do then is, if they come back, work in your department once again, you take their folder from the inactive and put it back to active, so that that person file doesn't get deleted, and you can go ahead and continue to add information, documents, whatever was turned in for that personnel. And of course, when we get to putting information on those folders, you can add as much to the title as you want. Of course, there's a limitation on the length of the number of characters you can put on the title. So you don't want to be too long, but you can put things like when the person left service, so that you can be sure to put it in the proper folder, inactive folder. And then, of course, when we get to 2051 for the 2020 uh, personnel folders, you can review the contents before you delete those files, because once you delete it, that's it. So, so the difference is, because we don't have an electronic records center, if you do manage your files in electronic format and you do it this way, or you can even do something within SharePoint, you actually retain the files, because the State Records Center can't store them for you at this time. Just to let you know, managing digital files are a little more, it has a certain amount of risk that's maybe different from paper records. We need to make sure that our record keeping systems are usable within the retention period. So if we're talking about 30-year retention, many things can happen to your Office files for that length of time. You could change systems. Your server might fail. So you do need things like redundancy, so backup, so that you could actually reconstruct or not reconstruct, you can still have data. You still have information, because you have a backup system that when your electronic records management system fails, you have other sources of information that you can use. So things like that. There could be formatting issues too. So if your records are in PDF format, and if 20 some years from now, PDF no longer becomes the acceptable preservation format for files, then someone in your IT department would need to probably convert your files to whatever the acceptable format is at that time. So are there any questions? That seems like a handful of information. Um, and I do know that people are asking more and more about digital records. So that was one easy way to manage them, but it's not the only way. It all depends on what you need to do. So if you have any questions, I think, let's see, do I have chat up? Uh, okay, there aren't any questions so far, but if you think of any, please put it on chat. Okay, so Ashley, we advise you to keep electronic records as well as paper? So the advice sheet on digitizing non-permanent records, it also mentioned a statute where it actually, the state allows you, once you convert a record to digital, once you scan the record, you can actually deem the electronic record to be the official record. And you can go ahead and change. I mean, you can go ahead after you go through the various requirements on that advice sheets to ensure that you have a proper electronic record um, that is that could be usable for the length of time this record has to be alive. Um, you can go ahead and destroy the paper records. So for the State Record Center, because we can't accept your electronic records, we can actually accept your source files. So if you're scanning and you need to have enough time to do quality assurance in your record, meaning you want to hold onto the paper just in case, we can store them for you. And we can use either the same retention, if it's short enough, it's like 6-year retention, yeah, we can do that. If it's a longer retention period, we can actually use the schedule on the section called electronic records. Look under source files. I think it says non-permanent. You can destroy it after you've done quality assurance. Because the State Record Center has a 2-year requirement for retention for records coming here, I would at least minimally say 2-year retention here. And then after that, we'll ask you, are you ready to destroy these records? Do you feel confident with your digitized records? And then once we get your approval, we'll go ahead and destroy those records. Okay, so Kyler, yes, we could do a session on PDFA as a standard. We can also talk about TIFF maybe for maybe like photograph collections as formats. But just to let you know, the state archives actually will accept your records, permanent records, in almost any format. You just need to tell us what it is. And it's our responsibility to find a way to accept it in its original format and to preserve it. So if we need to convert it to something, we will. Over time, of course, because as I mentioned, hardware, software, all of that will change over time. And we need to, as the preservation arm of the state, has to make sure that your record is preservable. But yes, if you are going to be scanning your records, PDFA, as Kyler is mentioning on chat, would be the preservation format that we would suggest you use. I hope that answers your question, Kyler, and thank you for bringing it up. Okay, so let me go to the next slide. Okay, so as I mentioned, there are other schedules affecting official personnel folder. So this particular one talks about a person being transferred. And what usually happens for those paper records is the records get sent to the new department where the person moved to. And they will take care of that personnel folder from then on. Of course, if you digitize that record, all you'll be sending them will be a copy. So you technically could retain a copy of that file in your server because, well, you can destroy it, but it's up to you. It's retention is actually minimum requirements. If you do decide, which we don't actually tell people to do, if you decide to hold on to it longer, that's also your prerogative. Okay, so any questions about transferred employees, files that you have to send elsewhere, no longer your responsibility? Okay, and this is the last retention schedule. So these are what I mentioned, the duplicate copies of those files for the office where that person works at. We do retain them because, you know, just so that we have something to work with while the person's working in our office. And those are considered non-permanent. You can review them annually, you can destroy when superseded, and you can destroy them upon termination because you don't need that file anymore at that point. Okay, so another reason, more reasons why we should apply those retention schedules. As I mentioned, only 3 to 5% of records created have long-term enduring value. The rest sometimes are called rot, redundant, obsolete, trivial information. And unfortunately, this part here is so easy to get bigger and bigger when we're in digital formats. Because what do we do when we find a file that we want? We download it from our servers and we keep it. And then we need it and we look for it again. So we can't find it. We go to our server again, we download it again. We might have copy in our desktop, our OneDrive, we might have oodles of copies. So unfortunately, the managing or getting rid of rot is harder because of our human nature of making copies of things that we need. But I think organizing our files in digital form, putting in our SharePoint so we know that it's always there. We could always just use it. Um, Makes it maybe hopefully easier for people to realize that they don't necessarily need to always make that copy. Or if they do, they could delete it after they finish using it at that time so that we don't hit our maximum in terms of our own hard drive. I don't know if anyone has hit their maximum in terms of SharePoint sites or OneDrive. I don't know. But that is something to be cognizant of and to know that things that are duplicate files, meaning not the official record, please every so often clean out your folders because it's taking up a lot of room in your hard drive. And for people who are managing shared drives, we unfortunately need to probably assign someone in our office to manage those so that they don't get full and we don't have copies of the same things over and over again in different folders. When we do this, when we apply retention, it signals that our department supports open government because we have records when they need to be there, and shows transparency because people have access to those files when needed, and we are accountable because we follow our retention schedules and we destroy records that are no longer needed. Okay, if you can't find a retention schedule that fits the records that you're managing, please call us, Hawaii State Record Center. This is my number, or you can send us email and we can actually help you. If you haven't signed up for the creating or updating records retention schedules on Wednesday, please sign up for that course. We'll go over how to update, create, abolish retention schedules. So how do you transfer inactive non-permanent paper records to the Record Center? Usually at the end of the calendar year or fiscal year, you go pull those files from your file cabinets, box them, put them in chronological, numerical, alphabetical order, whichever order you usually keep your files. If the box is partially full, please stuff them with crumpled newspaper or something so the files don't get bent or out of order. Um, and you need to actually do this by year of destruction. So one fiscal year would have a set of boxes. That's one accession. Another fiscal year will have its set of records. You can box them from one to whatever. And in your box numbering system, you could put 2001-1, which is the box number, 2001-2. And then for the next accession, 2021-1, 2021, 2022-1, 2022-2, and so forth. If you're sending more than 10 boxes, please complete an ARM5 form, an ARM5A form if you want to send us a listing of the various file titles in each box, and send a draft to recordcenter@hawaii.gov for review. If 10 or less boxes, we ask that you submit it through Versatile Web. There is a Versatile Web training session on Friday, so that you know how to use it. If you don't have any records with us right now, but you're considering sending, um, I do suggest you attend that course anyway, because that is how you're going to see what records, what boxes are stored at the State Record Center, so you can go ahead and um, retrieve records or request records. And this is also how you would submit boxes, information about boxes. So if you have records, great. Please join that course. If you haven't, we haven't given you your credentials yet because we haven't asked for it. And then, of course, finally, we pick up records from your agency because we actually have a van that could fit 50 boxes at a time. If you're in Neighbor Islands, once again, if you're general funded, we have some funding and we can work with you in terms of sending those boxes to us. If it's large order, meaning you have 500, maybe 1,000 boxes, we would probably need to do procurement and have a mover move those, get those boxes, put it in a shipping container and send it to us. If you're sending like 50 or so, maybe 100, we can actually ask you to send it to us via Young Brothers. And we will go ahead and pick it up from here and we will pay for it when we get those records. Okay, we do have fee schedules for non-general funded agencies, like and agencies like Department of Education, University of Hawaii, Judiciary, they are storing some records here, and non-state agencies, we have a few of those, and of course, non-general funded agencies. These are the two comptroller's memos, and I did send them to you so you know that it's not free for some of our agencies. But for most of you, general funded ones, definitely free. Please use our services. Um, In terms of records management forms, you go to our website. This is where you download the ARM5. The ARM5A has to be updated. Right now it's being used for microfilm. As I mentioned, we're updating our website, so this will change a little bit in this week. This is what our van looks like. So you are very much welcome to use our pickup services. And when requesting records from the Record Center, we used to ask you to fill out an Excel form. Now we ask that you log into the Versatile website. And if you don't have an account and you need one, please email recordcenter@hawaii.gov. we will need, besides your name, your agency, your phone number, and your street address, so we can put all that information to send records to you. When destroying non-permanent records in your office, when you're applying retention, please shred them so that there's no accidental release of personally identifiable information. Also, I don't know, from my experience, the public do dumpster diving sometimes, and if they see government records in there, sometimes they get really angry. So it's safer just to shred records. You need to complete an ARM7 form to document the destruction in accordance with an approved retention schedule, and you need to send us that form. You need to send one to us. You can just CC us. You can send it to your departmental records officer. For you, you need to retain these records for 3 years, the ARM7 forms. For us, it's permanent. We have had open records requests um, directed at us because when they contacted the agency who owned the record, they either didn't respond or couldn't produce the record. So what they were looking for are documentation of when those records were destroyed. So your forms are actually very important to us. Okay. So for destroying non-permanent records at the State Record Center, we will send you a notification, and this usually goes to the records custodian, the person who was managing the records at the time it was sent to us. If that person has left service, we'll try to figure out who took over that position, and that person will receive a notification on Versatile Web, and they have to review the listing of boxes and tell us which ones we can destroy. We will shred the records once they are approved. And this is what the records look like. We palletize them, we shrink wrap them, and they're ready to be picked up by our contractor who does the shredding. Um, Once the records have been destroyed and we update the record, the versatile record, for that accession, you will no longer be able to see that record when you do a search, because after all, you can't ask us to retrieve a record for you if that record has been destroyed. If you do need a certificate of destruction, we could actually print one for you. But at this time, we don't send you ARM4 forms anymore to manage. The ARM4s are with us. And like I said, we will send it to you if you request it. Now, sending permanent records to Hawaii State Archives. If your retention schedule says permanent, you are willing to transfer it to the state archives. It doesn't matter if it's paper or electronic. They are able to accept those two formats. You just need to contact Hawaii State Archives. They will assign you an archivist to work with you on how to transfer that. There is an SA6 form that they will send you to be filled in. That is still an old school form, so you do need to get that signed by your records custodian and your departmental records officer. They will use our van to pick up those records if needed. So they will schedule that with us. Probably our office assistant and our warehouse worker will help pick up those records and deliver it to the state archives. Okay, so how do we continue to manage our records now that we know what is required of us? Using your records retention and disposition schedules, you need to create a file plan for your office. The file plan generally contains the schedule number, record series name, description of the record's retention and disposition information, the location of the records, and then the person who is managing that record. And of course, the disposition action. How often does this person need to do this? Is it yearly, quarterly? Who does it? What happens when uh, every year for that record. You use the file plan to add retention information for electronic records. So once you create this, um, it's you have to find a way to implement it for electronic records. So for folks who are using SharePoint, we're still in the process of working with ETS to try to find a way to implement records retention on it. So we'll keep you up to date, and we hope someday to be actually having a training session for that. But we're waiting for more staff at the State Record Center, more archivists to help work on that. And we do need to do something in terms of the retention schedules. Right now, we have too many variety that it's hard to implement on SharePoint or any large electronic records management system. We need to actually create groupings that make it easier so we're not overwhelmed with the variety of choices to apply to our electronic records. So you need to review your file plan annually and update records retention and schedules and update your file plans as needed so that you can use this. It's like a perpetual wheel that keeps going. And as your agency grows, changes, as your staffing grows and changes, records management continues because your staff knows what to do. Okay, here's an example of a file plan. As I mentioned, it has the series name, it has the retention schedule number, has a short description of what it is, the retention and disposition, where it's located in your office, who's responsible for it. You can either put a person's name here or you can make it generic so that if it's like revolving door, meaning many changes, you still know it's always the records officer or personnel officer. And what happens? What does this person need to do in the destruction access? Sorry, destruction action for the file. So that's all I have. Let's see, what time is it? Oh, wow, we're a little over time. So if there are any questions, please let me know.
Gina, you have a question in the chat from Landon
Okay, what's the
Murata.
question?
Landon's asking if our specific records retention schedule does not specify location and makes no mention of digitization, can we hold all our stuff on site and can we digitize at our discretion?
Oh, okay. So if it's your specific retention schedule, Landon, it's your departmental schedule, it applies to you as the department, only to you. So let's see. It doesn't, yeah, it will not specify location because if you look at the compilation of retention schedules, it actually divides up the different divisions, sometimes branches or offices within your department. So when you see that retention schedule, it is already specific to your agency. It doesn't mention digitization. We actually want our retention schedules to be format agnostic, meaning we're not going to tell you what format. If you look at the older ones, it mentions microfilm. We don't want that. We were just going to say this type of record retention is this many years. We don't care what format you keep it. That's how long you need to keep it. Yes, you can hold all of your stuff on site. Um, but if you're running out of space, if it's paper, it's still much, much more cost effective to set it to State Record Center because storing with us is cheap. It's free if you are general funded, and we store the records vertical. So they take up much, much less room than a regular office file cabinet. And how do I get a copy of prior ARM7 forms that have been submitted by our unit? That will take us a little bit of research to do because they are filed by year. sometimes not by agency. So maybe you could be much more specific about that ARM7 and keep in touch with Susie. She will probably be the one who will assist you with that search. All right. Any other questions? Anything else, Susie, that I missed?
No, that's all. They can email us at recordscenter@hawaii.gov if they have any further questions.
Yes. Email, call, chat with us on Teams, your call. Just get in touch with us because we are here to assist. Thank you so much for attending, everyone. We'll try to post the recordings of all of these sessions on the Hawaii State Archives website. We'll probably upload it on our YouTube channel, and then we'll try to create a link on our website. All right. Thank you, everyone. Hope to see you the rest of the week for the other presentations. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Hey,
much.
hey, this is Landon.
Hi,
Can I
Landon.
speak to someone on the side real fast?
Sure. You can do it
Uh,
now. Oh, wait. I should stop recording at some point. So hold on. Let's do that. Stop recording. Okay.